Welcome, everybody. You're listening to AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast. Here is your host, Kevin Ferrara.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Weekend Wrap-Up here on AFSO 21. I'm your host, Kevin Ferrara, and as always, we thank everybody for your support. Remember, as we go through this podcast, to like, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, YouTube channel, that's a way of showing us that our listeners are out there, and that you support what we here at AFSO 21 and especially the Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast are doing to get information out to you, the fire emergency responders, in terms of legislation and issues really impacting you as emergency responders out there. So before we get started, let's say what we're gonna talk about here first. So, this episode, we're gonna recap on some legislation that's ongoing down in Congress. This past several weeks, we've seen some changes occurring. I know we wanted to see change last year. It didn't really happen. This year, it looks like it's happening. It's happening. It's happening. So that's what we're gonna talk about this episode. We're gonna talk about legislation. We're gonna talk about a Senate confirmation hearing that's coming up, and we're gonna touch on PFAS blood testing as well. So stay tuned. We're going to take a short pause to hear from one of our sponsors, First in Wellness, and you've heard me talk about them before. We've had them on the podcast, but stay tuned, listen to them, and then we'll be back. Thanks. Being an emergency responder involves risks, but you have the power to mitigate such risk. Kevin Ferrara here from AFSO 21's Weekend Wrap-Up Podcast, and I want to introduce you to First in Wellness. Their mission is to provide affordable and easy-to-follow programs that don't require a complete lifestyle change to experience more energy, restorative sleep, and confidence in your body. Offering individual and group programs that produce guaranteed results without sacrificing your long-term health and well-being, First in Wellness is so confident in their programs, if you're not satisfied in the first 60 days, they'll completely refund your money. For a limited time only, use promo code AFSOFIT15 to get 15% off their First In Fitness program, or use AFSORES50 to get 50% off their First In Resilience program. First In Wellness also offers grants specifically for group resilience program. To learn more about First In Wellness, head over to firstinwellness.com. That's firstinwellness.com. All right, folks, we are back, and if you have not checked out First in Wellness yet, please do. Excellent team over there. It's their programs are simple to use. They're web based. They've got different types of programs. You can take a look at. Like I said, very easy. Make sure you use those discount codes that you heard there in the promo, and let us know what you think. If you sign up and start taking the program, obviously let First in Wellness know how you're doing, but, also let us know as well, because, we're participants of that program as well. We've partnered with them. We're on their website, the feedback, good or bad, we always love to hear that. We take the bad, turn it into a positive. So, hopefully everything is a positive though. But so let's kick into this. As we said at the top there, we're going to talk about some legislation that's ongoing in Congress, and the first one out the door. It's making its rounds on social media. HR 2499. That is the Federal Firefighters Act of 2021. Now, this thing has, you've heard 2021. This thing's been setting in Congress for a little while. Getting kicked around. Not a whole lot has really, happened with it. Those that are familiar with legislation, things do not happen overnight, despite what we want. It takes a little while, sometimes years and years and years before legislation finally gets to the point where we're at today. HR 2499, the Fed Firefighters Act of 2021, they recently had what's called a markup. This went before committee back on 16 March of this year. We're going to have a link to that video. It was recorded. They talked about some other bills. There was, I think, like 4 or 5 different bills that they talked about, but 2499 was one of those that was getting a lot of interest in the fire service community, especially the federal level. So what happened was they had a markup. They went through. They talked about some amendments. A few members wanted to tweak it, or they approved or disapproved. They had their 5 minutes back and forth talking about it. Unfortunately, Fred Keller, I continue to call you out. You're still our rep here in Pennsylvania in the 12th district. You were against this bill, 2499, despite the fact that you voted yes for similar legislation here in Pennsylvania that would protect firefighters. Basically saying, hey, if you're a firefighter, you develop certain illnesses or diseases, you're going to receive compensation for that, medical care, treatment, compensation. On the federal level, though, seems like Fred, he's not key with that. So, in fact, as you watch the video, you will see he actually questioned if there was a need for this 2499, this Fed Firefighters Act. I'm sure if you ask any of the federal firefighters are out there, and just firefighters themselves, especially their dependents, their families. Yes, this bill is absolutely needed. It's necessary. Firefighting is inherently risky. It's a hazardous occupation, and we don't see people lining up around the building, around the block, putting their name in. Now, and I say that because you look at other jobs that are out there, less risky, less hazardous, that actually do pay more. Firefighting, you're not going to become a millionaire. Well, so some somehow have with overtime and stuff like that. That's for another story, but yeah, this isn't a job to where you're gonna be the penthouse office. You're not gonna have these McMansions. It's more, hey, I'm giving back to the community. I'm a public servant. Give back type of career field. I'm not saying the other jobs aren't like that, but again, firefighting. It's not the pay scale has come up, whether you're, at the federal, or, even municipal levels. Pay is coming up slowly, because, the known hazards, the known risk, it's a high risk. So therefore, that's one of the incentives or the enticing things that governments do is to, to try to entice more applicants to come in. They say, hey, we're going to have, this is your starting pay. So, back in the day, years ago, really when I first started, back in the late 80s, pay scales weren't that high, for the paid departments. They were few and far between here in Pennsylvania. A lot of volunteer. There's still a lot of volunteer. But yeah, so it's getting back to the 2499. Like I said, they had a markup on that. They went through. They had the amendments, back and forth discussions, everything like that, and it passed the committee to go back to the House for consideration and voting. So that's where it's setting at right now. It's setting in the House, waiting to get scheduled really for to get on the floor, if you will. And who knows when that's going to happen? Hopefully soon. It's got some traction. Hopefully it doesn't we're only in March. We've got a lot of time this year. We think it's gonna pass through the House. It may end up getting some Senate pushback, which is typical. I mean, one side versus the other. Funding is going to be a huge issue with this, and that's sort of, I think where Fred Keller was coming in. He made a statement. There was another bill out there. I think it dated back to the 70s. That was sort of his argument. Hey, we have laws on the books. We have, similar, legislation out there. Why are we sort of duplicating all of this? And he didn't really bring a lot to the fight to prove that. It was just more some statements. But anyhow, his argument, you'll see the video. Hopefully you watch it. His argument pretty much, the air got let out of it, and the committee moved on, and like I said, passed the markups that were presented, and then forwarded $24.99 back. So this is, and one thing also that was interesting, and I think one of the committee members may have brought it up, and it is being discussed, online, is, with federal firefighters now, does that incorporate or include wildland firefighters? And the belief is that yes, it will. So we're going to see. That's probably going to come up in the House. Some things on there. We'll see, or maybe on the Senate side. So stay tuned. Stay tuned on that one. The next one that is gaining a lot of excitement is HR 7089. And that's the Vet PFAS Act. Now, this was sponsored by Representative Dan Kildee up in Michigan. He's been working with the folks up there at the old Wordsmith military installation up there, and they've got a mess up there with PFAS contamination. It's first it was Flint, with water. Well, I think the Wordsmith has been going on longer than Flint. So I mean, Michigan. It's their water system up there, water sources, drinking water sources. It's bad. So they've got some great representation up there. They've got a fantastic local community member groups that are working tirelessly up there on not just on HR 7089, but other issues up there. They're really trying to hold the military, the DoD, especially the Air Force, accountable, because Wordsmith was a former Air Force base. And the water has been tested. It's been tested. It's been found to be contaminated with PFAS. Very, very, very likely because of the AFFF release that's been up there. So ongoing. The Air Force keeps pushing back, say, hey, we need more research and testing. You've heard me talk about last year. They got, I think it was $13.5 million for remediation efforts. But then the Air Force come back and said, no, we're going to use that for research and testing, and it's going to take a few years. And again, the Air Force itself really is not doing the research and testing. They contract out to these high-priced contracting companies. I used to work for one. I left them because there was things going on I could not be a part of. One of those, you've heard me talk about this before, is any contractor, federal contractor, they're gonna, if you give them 5 years to do a contract, they're gonna take 5 years. They may be able to knock it out in a few, but they're gonna take that 5 years. And I had one individual I worked with, he stated the CSP, and I was like, what the heck is CSP? Well, continued salary program. And it's basically, he told me, he's like, yeah, exactly what I just said. If you give us, 5 years to do a contract, usually it's like you're locked into a contract first year, then you get options after that. So if you're doing, quote, a good job the first year, and you're giving the client, i.e. the Air Force, the DoD, whoever it may be, products, deliverables as they call them, what they want, and very likely you'll get picked up as long as your pricing is fine. You'll get picked up the following option years, and that's what happened on the one program I was working on. That's exactly what happened. They kept stretching it. I came in there, found some inconsistencies. I was looking at it from a business analysis perspective because that's really what they hired me for. But then they said, no, that's we don't want you to do that because I was uncovering things, and it would have impacted the CSP. So getting a little off topic here, but yeah, that's things that that's why funding is what it is in the military. They take this, that 13.5 remediation used for up in Wordsmith, and then they use it for something else, and they're paying the stakeholders, the citizens within the contaminated communities. They never see a return on their their tax monies, and that's what that 13.5 million is exactly that. It's taxpayer money that's really being misused. I won't say it's fraud, waste, and abuse, but it's a misuse of funds, plain and simple. And that's why I and many others are we're pushing back so hard. We call people out to hold them accountable because otherwise this whole PFAS issue is going to it just gets kicked down the road. That can, the PFAS can, the AFFF container, if you will, it keeps getting kicked down the road, and for somebody else to pick up. And that's why we're also seeing with administrations, they keep increasing these spending bills. It's, I think what the latest one was like 1.5 trillion. There's a lot of pork in those, but at the end of the day, how much of that 1.5 trillion really goes towards like this PFAS? It's anybody in the military, when it comes budget time, you ask for the world, and then as it's whittled down, you accept what you get, because if you turn it down, you're most likely not going to get anything the following year. So, but again, HR 7089, the Vet PFAS Act, again sponsored by Representative Dan Kildee up in Michigan. It's been introduced. And one thing I want to talk about here, and you're gonna, those that watch me, on YouTube, I go back and forth with different screens, and the one thing with this bill, we'll start here with Section 2, the hospital care medical services for veterans and dependents exposed to PFAS. Now, what's interesting with this, and let me drag it over here so I'm not sort of looking around. The hospital care and maintenance service for veterans. Now, again, that's why it's Vet PFAS Act. This, and unless you're a veteran, this really doesn't apply to you. I know firefighters, you're like, hey, wait a second, we've been exposed to PFAS. Military firefighters, that's great. This is gonna apply to you. Unfortunately, with the Federal Firefighters, the GS firefighters that are out there, I don't see this applying to you. Are they going to pass other legislation? I don't know. We're tracking that, similar legislation, but I think this will get the foot in the door, and go from there. So, with the hospital care and medical services for veterans, it's got some, information in there. And again, these links, these documents will be up. They'll be included in the podcast description, whether it's on, the audio or the YouTube version. Plus, I'm going to have these on our website as well, afso21.com /PFAS. It'll be in there. Just scroll down to the legislation and you'll find it. So, what's interesting with this is that it says, beginning on the date that's 90 days after the date of enactment of this subparagraph. So the way these pieces of legislation work, first it has to pass, and then the timelines kick in. So, whatever date, say this thing were to pass today, hypothetically, it were to pass today. So you have 90 days from today's date, if you would. that a veteran who served on active duty in the armed forces at a covered military installation at which individuals were exposed to substances specified in Clause 2 is eligible for hospital care and medical services under subsection A2F for the diseases, illnesses, or conditions as specified in such clause, notwithstanding that there is insufficient medical evidence to conclude that such illness or condition is attributed to such services. My God, you can tell attorneys write these pieces of legislation. It is, I mean, I've sat in so many court cases. I used to be prior law enforcement. I was a deputy sheriff here in central Pennsylvania at one time. And, I sat in court hearings, trial hearings and everything. And the way that reads, you look at laws. I mean, that's exactly, it is a law. But holy cow, let's just, let's make it simple. So what they're talking about on these diseases or illness or conditions, as it goes down through subsection 2, the substances and diseases, illnesses, or conditions specified in this clause are the following. And it says, with respect to perfluorooctanoic acid, diagnosed with high cholesterol. Hey, how many of us out there have it, myself included? Ulcerative colitis, thyroid disease, testicular cancer, kidney cancer, and pregnancy-induced hypertension. So they only list a few under this act, which is interesting because we know PFAS overall causes a lot more, or is linked. Scientists, you can't really say that it causes, just yet, still got to do that research and development, but they're saying it's linked to various illnesses and conditions, including cancer. So, and then it says, with respect to exposure to other PFAS, any disease, illnesses, or condition that the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, in consultation with the administrator of the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry of the Department of Health and Human Services, determines, pursuant to the study conducted under Section 316 of the 2018 NDAA, that a positive association exists between exposure to PFAS and such disease, illness, or condition. So again, they're looking at these studies, and it's going to be up to certain individuals to say, hey, yes, your conditions are linked or associated with exposure to PFAS. And then it goes on through, and it actually includes, family members as well. So this is something, that we've been really pushing for, is to expand beyond firefighters and veterans, is to start including their family members. So again, certain military installations, Section 1787A, healthcare of family members of veterans stationed at certain military installations. And it goes through, and again, it's got the 90 days after this would be enacted. So it looks like, they're actually including, family members in here as well. And now it says limitations. The Secretary may only furnish hospital care and medical services under subsection A to the extent and in the amount provided in advance in appropriation acts for such purposes. Again, it's going to go back to money. Money runs, everything. You can write these pieces of legislation all day long, but at the end of the day, if there's no money allocated to support these provisions in there, then we see people get, basically, that line around the building starts going around the block, and then it's down the highway, and people are waiting and waiting and waiting until money is allocated, and unfortunately, by that time, we've got veterans that are dying off. We've seen the same thing with Agent Orange. It's that's starting to to really come to fruition, compensation, for the veterans. But, there was no money there. It took forever. And unfortunately, we've had veterans pass away before they saw any true action on this. Hopefully that doesn't happen with this. Hopefully it gets passed. The money is there. Um, the current administration is just on a spending spree. It's like I said, there's so much pork in these spending bills. It just makes you wonder. It's like if we only took some of that money, a portion of that money that was, for their little personal agendas and funneled it back over to veteran care, firefighter care, how many lives would that protect and help out? It's just, we can only assume. But again, this is why, I keep saying, reach out to your members of Congress and demand their involvement in this, and tell them to really look at these spending bills and consider, we have to prioritize, is spending, millions of dollars to study a bug, in a rainforest somewhere overseas, more important than protecting our veterans and emergency responders here in the United States. For me personally, I don't want to see my taxpayer dollars going overseas. I want my tax dollars, contributed to programs here in the United States. And I think other countries, those that are listening, around the world, I think you would want the same thing. Your tax dollars, your money should be going towards programs, to support and protect, individuals within your own country. So, I'm not saying don't help out other countries, but we have to prioritize. We have to say, wait a second, let's pull back a little bit and look at this. So, as this bill, the HR 7089 goes through, this is, again, we're talking about presumptive, section 3, of the bill is titled Presumption of Service Connection for Certain Veterans Exposed to PFAS, or other PFAS. So it talks about, presumptive of service connection for certain veterans exposed to PFAS. And again, it goes down through and it talks about, what those diseases or illnesses specified in this subsection. Again, high cholesterol, ulcerative colitis, thyroid disease, testicular cancer, kidney cancer, and pregnancy-induced hypertension. So again, they're looking at presumptives. If you're exposed to PFAS and you have any of those diseases or illnesses that I just recited there, then it's going to be presumed those are because of your exposure to PFAS. Now, it also talks about naval personnel, active military, Navy, or Air Service. Again, for the purposes of this section, any service by a member of the reserve components for a period specified by the Secretary at a military installation described in subsection A2 shall be treated as active military, naval, or air service, notwithstanding section 101, comma 24 of this title. So they're also looking at, Guard and Reserve on here because, a lot of times Guard and Reserve are like, hey, what about us? We're not considered active duty. A lot of the legislation is written just for active duty. We know that to be true. A good example is the 2020 NDAA, to where PFAS blood testing was only for active duty military and DoD civilians, veterans, and former firefighters. Whether you retired or you separated early, once you're out, you're out. They didn't consider us. So that is being discussed as we speak in Congress, to include former personnel. It's time they do it. But again, they may include it. They may have a provision in there, but the funding is going to be a major influencer on that, because let's face it, how many look at the size of the veteran component. Active duty is huge, but that veteran, that prior service component is even bigger. And with this PFAS issue, it's going to be that line around the building, around the block, down the road. It's going to be across the country, literally waiting to get in and get a PFAS test done. Fortunately, there are companies out there that can do it from home. You don't have to wait. You just order it, like Eurofins Empower DX. We are going to be interviewing them here shortly. We actually started the interview yesterday. We had some issues here in the studio. First, the computer, our system crashed, and then we lost power, so we had to reschedule. So we're gonna reschedule that. So that hopefully will be our next episode coming up, talking about what that PFAS blood test does and everything. So, looking at 7089, you have to look at similar legislation. So 7089, like I said, it's presumptives on PFAS. It's great. It's coming out of Michigan, Representative Dan Kildee, but it only has a few diseases and illnesses. Whereas if you look at the HR 2111, the Michael Leasick Military Firefighter Protection Act, that's been going on for far too long, it's not really moving. It needs to move this year. So are these two bills going to merge somehow, or are we going to look at, hey, these are the veterans that are covered, but then we're going to have the firefighter one? It's tough. Which one do you go with? Firefighters, I got a feeling they may look at this one a little bit more because it's smaller in scale in terms of presumptives than what the veteran would be. I'm not diminishing, the need to protect veterans. I'm not diminishing the need to protect firefighters. This is one where, being a veteran and a firefighter, military firefighter, I'm sort of on the fence. I'm like, we really should not be, ignoring either one. So when we look at 2111, Mike's bill, the specified diseases. Now, again, this is presumptives. That the whole intent of 2111, Mike's bill, is to establish presumptives for military firefighters. It says, hey, you're exposed to PFAS, you're exposed to, other toxins, basically the nature of the job. So therefore, if you develop a list of these, specified diseases, or cancers, we're just going to presume those are a result of your exposure. So looking at Mike's bill, the diseases specified in his is heart disease, lung disease, brain cancer, cancer of the blood or lymphatic systems, leukemia, lymphoma, except Hodgkin's disease, multiple melanoma, bladder cancer, kidney cancer, cancer of the reproductive system, including testicular cancer, cancer of the digestive system, colon cancer, liver cancer, skin cancer, lung cancer, breast cancer, and then each additional disease, if any, that the Secretary determines in regulations prescribed under this section. So again, Mike's bill is a little bit more broad in terms of specified diseases and illnesses, whereas Kildee's bill, 7089, is a little bit more limited, and I don't know why they did that. They should be talking back and forth on these bills, with similarities. But again, that's the problem in any any government, whether it be, Congress, your state, your local levels, when there's similar legislation out there, it's a fight. It's a battle to get yours passed before the others. And I personally see there's going to be a fight back and forth. I hope Mike's bill does not get pushed back. I have not seen any traction on this. Dan Kilde's on his way out. I think this is his last year. I'm not sure if he's running for re-election come November. So I think he's going to make an all-out push to get. This is going to be his legacy right here. His legacy bill is to get this Vet PFAS Act bill passed. So, I support it. A lot of military veterans support his particular act. But at the same time, I support Mike's bill and other bills that are out there that are drafted or designed to protect veterans and firefighters and really, the community that surrounds these military installations. So with Mike's bill, it talks about covered veterans. When they say a veteran is described in this subsection is trained in fire suppression and served on active duty in a military occupational specialty or career field with a primary responsibility for firefighting or damage control for at least 5 years in the aggregate. So what that means is that, obviously Air Force firefighters, you're trained in fire suppression. But that, that very first one, it says is trained in fire suppression and served in a military occupational specialty or career field. So think about all of those Navy folks that are listening, watching, that are thinking, hey, am I eligible? Most, if not all naval personnel are trained in fire suppression, because when you rotate, you could be, land-based, you could be shipboard based, who knows where you're at. Whereas the Air Force, you're on, your boots on the ground, you're on land somewhere. And it's the same, pretty much the same thing, no matter where you go. Whereas the Navy, it's going to be different. But yeah, Navy goes through fire suppression training. But then the catch here is in a military occupation specialty or career field with primary responsibility for firefighting or damage control for at least 5 years in the aggregate. So that aggregate means, combined overall. So, you may have 2 years, as a primary career field, a break in that, and then rotate back and say, okay, I've got, 3 more years. So that you would have a total of 5 years in that. It doesn't have to be consecutive. It just has to be aggregate. So if you do 20 years, within that 20 years, active duty military, you need to have, in order to be eligible for this, you would have to have 5 years, which is interesting because some folks, they may only do 4 years, they may only do 6 years, and then get out. So, are they going to meet that 5 years in the aggregate? That could be a disqualifier for them. They may start out as, in a career field, as, firefighting or damage control, but then they cross train, into something else. We've seen that a lot. And then they decide to get out. Well, they don't have that 5 years aggregate. So according to Mike's bill, and this is one that I spoke with the sponsors, staff, Representative Spanberger, said, hey, you're going to disqualify, a lot of folks on here. And then, the second one that would disqualify is the period specified in this subsection is within 15 years of the date on which the veteran separated from active military, naval, or air service. So again, 15 years from the date that they separated. So think about that individual that was diagnosed with cancer, 15 years and 1 day, according to, from the date that they separated. According to Mike's bill, that would be a disqualifier. So, I really stress, I hate timelines and I hate certain requirements, because especially those requirements or eligibility requirements that disqualify veterans. PFAS doesn't go away. We didn't ask to be sick. This stuff is persistent. It's called forever chemicals. Just because, we separated, retired, whatever, left the military, active duty, doesn't mean, these illnesses and sicknesses are going, they go away. I've stressed before, I'm like, 15 years, okay, you may not get sick in 15 years. You may get sick in 20, 30, 40 years after your separation. And therefore, those individuals should be eligible for compensation. It's I don't know if this was an intent to get it in the door, have some lesser timelines on there, and then make an amendment to it later on. I don't know. I have not heard back from Spanberger's office regarding this, even though they promised me somebody would get back to me. So we're going to follow up this month. In fact, with the various pieces of legislation, we're going to start making phone calls, emails. If I got to drive down to Washington, D.C., I will do that. It won't be the first time, won't be the last time either. So I encourage you, take a look at these two bills. H.R. 7089, the Vet PFAS Act, sponsored by Representative Dan Kildee out of Michigan. And then H.R. 2111, the Mike Leasick Military Firefighters Protection Act, still sitting idle in Congress. Representative Spanberger was one of the primary sponsors on that. And, we compare and contrast these two bills, and start asking questions, whether, reach out to your congressional reps, your senators, your capital, U.S. Capitol reps, and ask them, say, hey, what's the status on especially on 2111? Ask them, say, hey, what's the status on this? Do you support, and then also, do you support both of these acts? These bills. See if they're on board. It's a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised. There's representatives out there that they're not on board with these. We just need to get those passed. So not representative. I'm losing my train of thought here for a second. So there's a new individual coming to light here. President Joe Biden has nominated Bill LaPlante for. He is coming up. Let's see here, and I'm just reading through it. He is says, and I'm looking at Defense News, and I'll have a link to this as well. It says Biden nominated LaPlante, now the chief executive of Draper Laboratory, for Undersecretary for Acquisition and Sustainment, or A&S, in late November, but his nomination wasn't received in the Senate until February. So they're actually scheduled for March 22nd for this committee hearing, nomination hearing, if you will. And we've been having meetings to discuss this with members of Congress and or their staff. We put some questions out there. Our folks over at EWG, they put together some talking points on there. The big things that we want members of the Senate to ask, and again, we're gonna put these talking points out there, so you can reach out yourself to members of the Senate. I know it's tight, but at least call up and say, hey, there's a nomination hearing coming up. I'm a member, I'm a constituent of your district. I'd really like you, our reps to ask, our senator to ask these questions, and get the DOD on record. So, just a few of them. There's a handful here. Just a few, that I'm focused on. Is when will the DOD release its report on the 50 most contaminated sites? Now, they EWG and I think there's some legislation out there. They actually call it the Filthy 50. Now, what this is it just what it says. The 50 most contaminated U.S. military sites, whether they're former or active installations. You've heard me talk about this before. Chanute. I went to fire school at Chanute. That's a dirty site. Cannon Air Force Base. That's a dirty site. At least the area surrounding it. Joint Base Langley Eustis, Langley Air Force Base, 2.2 million parts per trillion of on-base groundwater. That is definitely in the top 50. Fort Eustis, I don't think made the list, but there's still PFAS contamination there. The military tested it, they found it, whether it be in on-base, on or off base groundwater, drinking water, it's there. We had Thursday, yeah. We had a quick meeting with Senator Kane's office there in Virginia, and I specifically brought up that this was the Hampton Roads area. He's got an office down in Virginia Beach, so they're very familiar with the military installations down there. But I don't think they're very spun up on the amount of contamination that's there. I know we didn't get to speak with the senator himself. Talked to one of his staffers. Caught the staffer, just watching the reactions, when we were on the video call. I think we caught him off guard when I said, hey, 2.2 million parts per trillion, and the base leadership has not stated that there's any contamination whatsoever there. So that was interesting. It's to see and to sort of, that perception was that, how long have we known? I mean, the results have been out since 2018. But this is where, and this is something, we had talked about, amongst the community leaders. We had a meeting, and it just seems that certain individuals within that chain of command, whether it be at installation level, headquarters level, DOD level, there's certain individuals below the commanders that are providing cover. And what I'm saying is, it seems that certain information that should be going to commanders so they can make informed, well-educated decisions are not getting the proper information. It may be diluted. It may not come at all. So I think there, and I saw this when I worked at the Pentagon as well, is that, certain information that really should have gone up the chain to the top was not getting there. So that, there was a break in that chain of command. And then next thing you know, the commander's caught off guard and be like, hey, what the hell are we talking about here? And then quickly you got to get them spun up, and then they sort of look around, and military folks know exactly what I'm talking about. So so the question is, when are they going to release the report? I believe they may have missed the timeline on that. I didn't catch. We kept talking about the DoD has already missed the timeline. I think it's in regards to this 50 contaminated sites. But we can follow up on that. But still, they have to give a report as to what they're doing, remediation efforts, amount of contamination, all of that stuff. So another question, I've got highlighted here. It says, how will DoD improve communications and engagement with DoD communities? And this is something I just said, with Langley Air Force Base, leadership is not communicating with the base populace. Nor the civilian community. It seems they feel they're in a bubble. That base perimeter, that fence line, that's their bubble. You go from there and come up. And it seems like, whatever happens on the installation stays on the installation. They don't want to hear what's going on outside the installation. They don't, because it's more paperwork. So this is why I keep saying, reach out to your congressional reps, whether it be, your House reps, your Senate reps, whoever, because, and demand a congressional be filed. Military leaders hate congressionals because then they have to answer to Congress on, as to what's going on. It's like taking a magnifying glass to an anthill. You start making trouble, and everybody's just scrambling. So that's what congressionals really do. It holds these leaders accountable, as they should be. I mean, they are. Let's face it, they are funded by taxpayers. I was a veteran. I'm still a veteran. My compensation during active duty and during retirement is taxpayer funds. We as veterans have an obligation. Just because we retire doesn't mean our obligation to the citizens of the United States ends. We have an obligation to continue supporting and defending the Constitution, upholding laws and holding individuals accountable. And that's really what I'm doing, post-retirement here. I make waves and so be it. But, I work for the taxpayers, if you will, the stakeholders, the primary stakeholders. I work for myself. I got my own business, but at the end of the day, veterans, former military, we owe it. We owe it to the citizens of the United States that funded us during our careers and are funding us, post career. So, but yeah, the next question, and I've got a double highlight on this, is when will DoD alert veterans and service members that they may have been drinking contaminated water for decades? Now, this one I brought up, I think, in multiple meetings that we had, and it's like, look, we went to Chinook. The place was a disaster site. They knew there was contamination there. We drank the water up there. I go to Cannon Air Force Base, my very first assignment, and unbeknownst to us, we polluted the aquifer system, the drinking waters, underground, off base. Well, it ran under the base, so I really can't say it was off base or on base. But the aquifer system there that supplied water via wells to, Cannon Air Force Base, Clovis, surrounding area, the Highland Dairy Farm that's there. He got his well water. That story. His cows completely contaminated. He was on a call the other day, and he's like, yeah, he's got to start euthanizing his cows again. So I mean, the military really screwed this guy over, and they just from watching his conversations, it just seems like the military has no remorse. They're pretty much like, oh, prove it, prove we did all of that. So. I reached out to him. I'm like, yeah, we can prove it. I was there for 4 years. We sprayed AFFF all over that place, and it seeped into the ground, and eventually got into the groundwater, got into the aquifer, got pumped out. People drank it. I drank it, and nobody told us. So, other areas where contaminated water. And we know the water is contaminated, whether it's ground or drinking water. There's testing out there. EWG's got that interactive map. The testing has been FOIA requested. Not every installation has provided information, but we know. Good fellow Air Force Base. You guys got some contamination down there. It's been found. You guys were receiving bottled water, or the local community was receiving bottled water for a period of time. Cannon Air Force Base, the same thing, and then the Air Force just stopped. Okay, well, did the contamination go away, or did you just say, well, we checked the box, we did our what is it, community service? We got caught. Here's our community service. PR stunt really is what it is. And 6 months, oh, we're done. Okay, well, did you communicate with anybody and give them an update? Say, hey, we haven't found any more PFAS in the water. The risk is gone, or it's at least reduced to a minimum. But nothing. So that's a question that we want the senators to ask LaPlante. What and when will the DoD do in terms of conveying to veterans? Hey, you may have drank contaminated water. So and then lastly here, question is, how will you comply with the executive order to avoid products made with PFAS? Now, President Biden had issued an executive order that said, hey, for the military, the DoD, you have to, when able to, procure products that are PFAS free. So, when it comes to, complying with this, I've got penciled in here. Oh, turnout gear, firefighting foam. We're hearing manufacturers saying, foam manufacturers saying, oh, our products, they don't contain PFAS, trace amounts of PFOA though. Well, it's still PFAS. So whether it's, trace amounts or, exorbitant amounts, it still has PFAS in it. So according to Biden's executive order, if there's an available product out there that is truly PFAS free, then that's who you have to go with. So it's the same thing. Those that are familiar with the contracting process, purchase process in the military, you got to go through certain organizations first. You got to look at them. Do they provide a product before you can consider going third party or whatever? So even though those primary vendors are more expensive than what you may have found, because you got to get your 3 quotes and all of that stuff. So you send it over to contracting. Contracting may end up going with it's a vendor because they are on the priority list. You got to go through them first. They may go with that vendor that is way more expensive than somebody that you found off base that still supplies the same product. Before I retired, it's that was one of my additional duties, if you will, was logistics. The supply guy in the firehouse, and I encountered that numerous times, and I questioned it. And I'm like, why would we want to spend more money on some this vendor because they're on a priority list than we would on somebody off base? And they're like, well, that's the rules and blah blah blah. And I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll make a note of it that In my eyes, that was fraud, waste, and abuse. Again, mismanagement of funds, and again, they're taxpayer funds. So, the things that the things that go on within the military, the public has no idea when it comes to financial responsibility. My God, those jokes of, oh, you're paying $50,000 for a bolt, or $10,000 for a toilet seat. Yeah, that happens because these contracting laws that they have, or requirements that says you have to go with company A as opposed to company B. Just does not make sense. It's still going on, but yeah, this again, reach out to your reps and have the senator say, look, I'm a constituent. I want my senator to ask this specific question. And let them know. But yeah, like turnout gear, we know turnout gear has PFAS in it. Manufacturers are saying, oh, the outer liner, our fabrics don't contain PFAS anymore. And that could be true, but it's that moisture barrier that still contains PFAS. And it's because Gore makes, the material for the moisture barrier, and Gore includes PFAS in their product. So, when a manufacturer comes back and says, hey, our turnout gear is 100% PFAS free. No, it's not. Make and if they or their distributors state that, don't buy into it. Demand that they prove it. Demand that they provide you the scientific testing to prove with beyond a reasonable doubt that their product is in fact 100% PFAS free. And show me a manufacturer that can do that today, and I will gladly accept that. And but yeah, so far I have not found one company, whether it's turnout gear manufacturer, foam manufacturer, cookware manufacturer, waterproof clothing manufacturer, cosmetic manufacturer, that says, hey, our product is in fact 100% PFAS free. So, but again, reach out. The LaPlante Senate confirmation hearing coming up. Take a look at that. So, let's finish up here with PFAS blood testing. Like I said, it's the 2020 NDAA. It included a provision to offer PFAS blood testing to active duty military and DoD civilian firefighters. When you read through that, and again, we'll put the link up there, it actually defines who the eligible firefighters are. What I'm hearing through different channels is that one, doctors don't have a clue when when they get when the firefighters get their PFAS blood test results back. Doctors have no clue, first, what PFAS is, and second, what the numbers mean. So they're reaching out to me here at APSO 21, and asking, the firefighters are asking, hey, what do these levels mean? Am I going to get sick? Should I be concerned? And you've heard me talk about this before. The levels between all firefighters and former and military, I've been tracking it. They are high for PFHXS and PFAS. Those are the two that we're seeing elevated levels. Again, I cannot stress enough, if you're on active duty, DoD, military, civilian, get the PFAS blood test. Do not turn it down, because once you turn it down, you have to wait a year before you're able to get it again. They do it during your occupational health exam. So, and you have to sign a waiver. But what I'm hearing through different channels is that some civilian firefighters, your GS employees, excuse me, GS firefighters are not even being offered this PFAS blood test. Several have stated they had to demand it. They questioned their doctor about it. The doctor's like, yeah, and they tried steering them away from actually getting it done. Why they're doing that, I don't know. I suspect because they don't want the numbers to get out, in terms of, hey, our firefighters really are being exposed, whether it's through foam, turnout gear, other products that are being used out there. So it doesn't matter whether you're DoD, civilian, active duty military, get the test. Don't leave the office until you know that it's ordered and you have confirmation of it. Again, do not sign a waiver. These are, at the minimum, if you've never had a test done and you've got an opportunity coming up, at a minimum, that's a baseline. So you know how much PFAS is in your blood. I had a PFAS blood test done by Eurofins. Actually, my son just got his back. Now my son was just a military dependent. And hey, guess what? He's got PFAS in his blood. So it surprised me. I'm like, they're not high levels, but they are detectable levels. So, it's like, how'd that stuff get into your body? Oh, it could have been through, drinking water. It's who knows what. But yeah, get the blood test done. If you were a former firefighter, military or DoD civilian firefighter, Eurofins, we're going to have a link to Empower DX. Right now, their pricing is $299. They updated their website, the Empower DX. It says for the first 500 tests, and then it jumps up $100 to $399. So get in there, be one of the first 500. I've had quite a good amount of feedback from civilian firefighters that are saying, hey, and former firefighters that says, hey, we get the test, got mine ordered, got the results back, and yeah, there's PFAS in there. Can you help me out and sort of decipher what this is? But they do a really good job. Like I said, they have their levels that they tested for, because they do it different than what the DoD and other companies are doing. There's a different process, and I won't get into it on this episode. I want the folks from Empower to really get into the weeds and talk about that. That's the whole intent of having them on the podcast. Not so much promoting their product, but now that more and more individuals are using their product, I want them to better explain than what I can. All the bells and whistles, and the research and development that went into that product, and why it's so successful today. So, like I said, we'll have a link on that. If you've had a blood test done and you've got questions, feel free to reach out to me here at AFSO 21 the Weekend Wrap Up, you can send me an email at the email is PFAS at afso21.com. I'll be more than happy to answer questions as best I can. If I don't have the answer, I've got a good network of folks that most likely will have the answer for you. If you sent me something in the past and I have not gotten back to you, first, I apologize if that's the case. Second, send me a reminder, be like, hey, I sent you this a little while ago. Just following up. I get bombarded with a lot of stuff. I appreciate it. Trying to play catch up, especially, after I had my little COVID pneumonia there for a little while, that set me back a little bit. So I'm sort of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel here. So, these are just some legislation stuff, I wanted to go over, for this, this episode, to keep you, the audience members, abreast of what's going on. It looks like 2022 could be the year of success on some of these bills. But again, I can't stress enough. I encourage you to reach out to whoever your congressional rep is, your House of Representatives, your senator, whoever it is, for your district. Reach out to them, ask them, say, hey, where's your stance on these pieces of legislation, and what is your stance on LaPlante's confirmation hearing, and and have them ask. Like I said, I'm going to put these talking points out there. Have your senator ask LaPlante these questions. They may tweak them a little bit, but at least the core of these questions, because we want the DoD on record saying, yes, this is what we're going to do or not do, and this is a way of holding individuals accountable. So with that, folks, that's going to do it for this episode. Again, I can't thank everybody enough for the support that you've been giving me in the podcast here. Over almost, I think we're coming up almost 2 years here, being on the podcast. We went from a scrappy little, hey, let's just talk and BS and put some things out there. And, we've evolved to, what you see on the screen here. I did some tweaking around, with some logos and stuff like that. Let me know what you think of it. And, also with FeedSpot, I can't thank them enough. FeedSpot is legit. A lot of folks are like, oh yeah, that's just, they're fake. No, FeedSpot is actually legit. They have a team of people that go through, look at websites, look at the content, and, they actually sit down and meet and say, hey, this is how we're going to rack and stack, what we found, as being worthy of, recognition. So, we're in the top 30, of Firefighter Podcasts, on the web. And we're also in the top 15. I think on the top 30, we're number 15. And then for the top 15 firefighter safety podcasts, we're number 5. So we were number 6 last year. We bumped up a spot on that. So, but yeah, just the, we could not have done that without your support. So, I thank you enough. Can't thank you enough, for doing that, for us, supporting us, here at the podcast. Obviously we want to see those rankings go up. We're working on that. But it's an honor, to just be recognized, in the top 30 worldwide, firefighter podcasts, and, in the top 15 for firefighter, health and safety podcasts. So, and again, that's by FeedSpot. We'll put links up there, so you can actually see, where we rack and stack and who we we're ranked among. So, but yeah, folks, again, that's going to do it. I love talking. I love being back on the air. I could do this all day long, and just ramble on and on and on, but I want to keep you guys engaged, and then keep coming back. So with that, that's going to do it for another episode here on the weekend wrap up. So until next time, keep supporting your local fire emergency services, and EMS out there. And I lost my train of thought there for a second, but yeah, that's going to do it. Stay safe, and stay tuned for a little outtake here for one of our sponsors. Take care.
One of the first things people ask me when they meet me is
Fire Department Coffee a real company?
Yes, we're real. Like really real.
No, we're not roasting your tasty beans here at the fire station. That's called water hammer. But we are roasting those wonderful beans of sanity to the perfect temperature here at our roasting facility.
And then shipping them to you from our brand spanking new fulfillment center. But don't take my word for it. Hear from some of the amazing people that have had our coffee.
Yeah, Fire Department coffee's real. Real as this guy's face.
Yeah, Fire Department coffee's real. As real as my urge to never wear a shirt. God dang it!
So if incredible tasting coffee is your thing, head on over to firedepartmentcoffee.com. But only if you like real great tasting coffee, real authentic gear, and real attractive firefighters. Really good coffee.